This is a spiritual crime, and we need to stop doing it. Before I dive into what the crime is, I want to tell you a story about a crime scene. Let me share my screen. We're going to go over the evidence for the crime, the whole thing. Let's go over it together. The story is called The Lie Continues. Put it in the form of a PowerPoint to make it pretty easy to follow along. Here's the crime. This is Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown was found dead in his apartment on October 4th, 2019. The evidence indicates he was stabbed over 100 times. You heard that right. This is George. Look at that face. Smiling, happy. This is George. Dr. Brown's neighbor. George heard loud screams on the day that Brown was murdered. When he heard the screams, notified the police. Police came out. Now this is Akira. Now Akira is a friend of Dr. Brown, and she was occasionally seen at Brown's apartment within the last year leading up to the murder. George, remember the other guy who called the police, the neighbor, George did not witness the murder of Dr. Brown, but he suspected Akira was the murderer. He had a suspicion. Now, this suspicion was based on George's bias against Asians. And Akira is an Asian woman. His bias is that, in his mind, Asians are always guilty of murder. If there's a murder, in his mind, an Asian is guilty. Now, this is David. David was also Dr. Brown's neighbor. Now, he suspected Akira was the murderer because he had witnessed Akira in Dr. Brown's presence the night before the murder. So he didn't see Akira with Dr. Brown on the day of the murder, but the night before the murder. Okay, he says, I saw them together. So he had some suspicions here. There was a murder weapon found at the scene. A bloody knife was found, presumably with Dr. Brown's blood on it. I mean, you got a dead body, you got a knife on the ground, and it's bloody, and you have a guy who's been stabbed over 100 times. It's likely that blood on the knife is Dr. Brown's blood, right? Okay. Now, this is Detective Williams. Detective Williams was assigned to investigate Dr. Brown's case, the murder of Dr. Brown in his apartment. Detective Williams immediately took statements from people at the scene, such as George and David. He then went and sought out Akira, took statements from her, and many others. David issues a public statement to the press. David gave one interview to the press and accused Akira of the murder. So he made the accusation, even though he did not see her there that day. He said, well, she was there the night before. So he accuses Dr. Brown. Well, I'm sorry. He accuses Akira of murdering Dr. Brown. Now, David's statement added fuel to the press reports that Akira was the murderer. Detective Williams continues with his investigation. And so Detective Williams had many statements to investigate, which took quite a long time to do. He even examined the numerous claims made by the press about the murder. It took a good month for him to do the investigation. After a month of research, Detective Williams released a report with his findings on what happened with the murder of Dr. Brown. Now, as far as the report that he released, the report revealed that Akira, now remember, Akira is the Asian woman who is accused of murdering Dr. Brown. There's no real evidence so far. We're going to see if the report backs that up. But one guy says she was there the day before. The other guy just says, well, he thinks, she has to be guilty because in his mind, Asians are always guilty. The report revealed that Akira was on a business trip 1,300 miles away from the crime scene at the time of Dr. Brown's death. Now, think about that. All right. She is seen the night before with him, but obviously she gets on a plane that night and goes somewhere. And she's now 1,300 miles away from Dr. Brown at the time of Dr. Brown's murder. She also had multiple alibis. I mean, after all, she's on a business trip. Credit card transactions for Akira confirmed her location 1,300 miles away at the time of the murder. Moreover, she posted a video of herself on social media at the time of Dr. Brown's murder, at the exact time. In this video, there's a well-known landmark visible in the background of her video, which confirms her location 1,300 miles away from the crime scene. Think about this. She's 1,300 miles away. Multiple alibis are admitting to it. Credit card transactions are confirming that. She even, for crying out loud, has a video of herself posted at the time of his murder 1,300 miles away. And you can see in the background very clearly a unique landmark, very visible, clearly showing her location is consistent with the location 1,300 miles away from the crime scene. The report also revealed Akira was a loyal friend of Dr. Brown and had no motives for murdering him. So far we have no motives. She's not actually witnessed at the scene. In fact, she's elsewhere and has multiple alibis for that. What about the murder weapon? Well, let's talk about Charlie, a new guy that we haven't talked about yet. Detective Williams' report revealed that the murder weapon indeed contained Dr. Brown's blood on it, but the fingerprints on the murder weapon did not belong to Akira, but belonged to Charlie. Dun, dun, dun. Charlie. Charley. Well, Charlie, who is he? He was Dr. Brown's business partner. He was seen by other witnesses at Dr. Brown's apartment shortly before the murder was reported. On the day before the murder, Charlie and Dr. Brown had an altercation at their place of business in front of everybody. Many witnesses to this altercation at their place of business. What was it about? It was over a major business deal that went bad. It did not end well, mainly due to a mistake made by Dr. Brown. So Dr. Brown, Charlie, business partners, they're at work. Dr. Brown messed up badly. Lost this deal, butchered it, cost them a lot of money. So there was an actual physical altercation between these two business partners in front of everybody the day before Brown was murdered. On the same day of the altercation, again, the day before he's murdered, Dr. Brown revealed to Charlie's wife that Charlie was unfaithful to their marriage with Charlie's mistress, Monica. I mean, this is getting juicy, right? Dr. Brown Same day, they have this fight. Presumably, Brown is trying to get back at Charlie for their fight. So he goes and tells Charlie's wife, hey, he's been unfaithful to you. That lady Monica you've been having suspicions about, yeah, they're actually having an affair. This further created animosity between Charlie and Dr. Brown because Charlie obviously found out Dr. Brown spilled the beans when he comes home and his wife is saying, oh, so this whole business with Monica, my suspicions were correct. Brown told me that you've been unfaithful. So this infuriated Charlie even more. They already had bad blood over this business deal. Now he goes and wrecks his marriage. Now, the report reveals all this information. The report also revealed that one day after the murder, the next day, Charlie confessed to his wife and others that he committed the murder of Dr. Brown. He confessed in front of multiple witnesses. Not only that, Monica, the wife of Charlie, recorded her husband's confession of the murder on her phone in video format. She has video, not just audio, video of her husband admitting to Brown's murder. So you have a murder weapon with his fingerprints on it. You have him seen at the time of the crime scene, right around the time of the crime. You also have him admitting to it. And you also have multiple motives that Charlie murdered Dr. Brown. Whereas with Akira, all of the evidence exonerates her, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now, let's talk about Charlie and the press. None of the news outlets reported anything about Charlie at the time of the murder. None. Not one. In fact, at the time of the release of the report from Detective Williams, the press and nearly everyone on social media had never even heard of Charlie before. Again, and at this time of the release of the report, Akira was still being blamed by everyone for the murder. Report comes out, exonerates her, shows Charlie's guilty. Nobody's even heard of Charlie. Wasn't even on anyone's radar. Now, Detective Williams sets the record straight. Detective Williams sends his report to every major news outlet. He even posted a copy of the report on his own personal social media accounts. I mean, he is serious about exonerating Akira and showing that, hey, yeah, it was actually a guy named Charlie. He also sent the press a copy of Charlie's video confession where he's on video saying, I murdered Dr. Brown. Likewise, he posted a copy of the video of the confession on his own social media. So it's out there in the press. The press have it. Social media, his accounts have it. He then contacted each person who gave a statement, including George and David. Now, remember, George was the one who says, I didn't see her there, but I think Akira did it because she's Asian. And I think Asian people are guilty. That's George. And David said, well, you know, I don't really care that she's Asian, but I did see her with Dr. Brown the night before he was murdered. So I think that she did it. So Detective Williams provides George, David, and all the other witnesses with both the report and the video confession. What's George's reaction? Again, George is the smiling one. George is the one who says, I don't like Asians. It has to be Akira because she's Asian. Well, Detective Williams noticed some strange behavior from George because George was still giving press interviews and making social media posts claiming Akira was the murderer even after a year of receiving the report and video confession exonerating Akira and showing that Charlie was the murderer. A whole year later, he's still on social media and giving interviews to the press saying Akira's the murderer. And so Detective Williams is like, wait, what? What's going on? I know I sent him a copy of all this stuff a year ago. Detective Williams followed up with George and asked him what he thought of the evidence that he sent to him. Well, hey, what do you think of that report? What do you think of that video confession? George said he read the report. So he said, hey, I read it. Oh, yeah, I read that report. I even watched that video confession. But I still maintain Akira is the murderer. Detective Williams is really confused at this point. He asks him, oh, okay. So how is that the case in light of all the evidence? I mean, you have a video confession here. You have an entire report showing she was somewhere else. Akira is somewhere else at the time of the murder. She has alibis. Everything is confirming she didn't do it. And yet you have this other guy. He has his fingerprints on the murder weapon. He has a motive. He admits to it. What's going on? Am I missing something here? George didn't grapple with any of the evidence. He says he watched it, but he didn't grapple with any of the evidence. But insists Akira was the murderer because she was Asian. So that was his reasoning. You know, it's not like he grappled with the evidence and shown it was wrong. He just says, well, it has to be wrong because she's Asian. And he emphatically maintains that all evidence provided does not overturn his belief that Asians, according to him, are murderers, and according to him, always guilty for every murder that has ever occurred in history. Now, oddly enough, instead of Detective Williams mocking George for his stupid and ridiculous belief, George actually began mocking Detective Williams for his quote-unquote evidence. He even said that Detective Williams was just trying to gaslight people into believing that Charlie was the murderer. He's just trying to gaslight people, brainwash them. But in reality, it's Akira. Well, after talking to Detective Williams, George then rushed to social media and claimed Detective Williams was a liar and fabricated his report and the video confession. But he provided no evidence for that claim that, Detective Williams just made all this up. He just said it, didn't grapple with any of the evidence, in fact, provides no evidence for his counterclaim. He then gave multiple press interviews. So he not only rushes the social media, he then gives interviews to the press, major news outlets, continuing to accuse Akira of the murder. George also adds that Detective Williams was a liar, providing no evidence. He even suggests to the press that Detective Williams may have been complicit in the murder of Dr. Brown along with Akira. So not only is Akira the murderer, I actually think this other guy, Detective Brown, is covering up the truth because he's in on it. He was part of it. George continued with a major public campaign claiming that Charlie was one of the greatest people to have ever lived. Remember, Charlie is the one who very clearly is the murderer. George, the biased guy, says publicly, Charlie is the best thing ever. He's one of the greatest people to have ever lived. And his honor and his honor and integrity is beyond reproach. Sorry, I'm laughing here with the comments in the comment section. His honor and his integrity beyond reproach. You can't question it. Charlie's an amazing guy. And he's not just saying this privately, he's saying it publicly defending him. As for Akira, George publicly begins to maintain and accuse Akira of being a prostitute who stole $16.2 quadrillion from Dr. Brown, though he provides no evidence for the claim. Now, Ask yourself the question, is there even $16.2 billion, quadrillion dollars in the world right now? I don't know. But just ask that question, right? Okay. She's a prostitute and she stole $16.2 quadrillion dollars from Dr. Brown. Evidently, this was a really lavish apartment he was living in. But he provides no evidence for the claim. Now, what's the reaction of the press here? Okay. So the press, they read the report. They even watched Charlie's video confession admitting to the murder. But, they said, you know what? Most of them just said, we're just not going to comment on this report publicly. We're not going to report on the report. We're not going to comment on the video confession. We're not going to talk about that in our news report. Instead, what we're going to do is, and they continued to, publicly report and accuse Akira of being the murderer. And as evidence for this, they cited George's testimony as their source. So George said it. George said. So George has to be right. The press and social media continued to slander Akira in every way conceivable, and even felt entitled to make up claims about her. I mean, they felt, well, look, she's already just such a trashy person. She's stolen $16.2 quadrillion dollars from Dr. Brown. She murdered the guy and she's a prostitute. So we now have license to even just make stuff up about her because, after all, she's a terrible person. So we're allowed to make up stuff about her and publicly defame her further. Consequently, Akira was fired by her job, as you could imagine. She wasn't a prostitute, by the way. So she was fired by her job, divorced by her husband, as you could imagine, and even forbidden by a judge to see her own children. Judge said, nope, you can't come near them. You're a murderer. Forbidden to see her children. Not even with supervision. Can't see your children anymore. Now, Detective Williams' report and Charlie, the murderer's, video confession received almost zero coverage on social media and nearly zero coverage by the press, even 4 years after this stuff has been released. Now, you remember David. David was also one who originally falsely accused Akira, but he said, but that's because I saw her with Dr. Brown the night or the day before he was murdered. But once David became aware of the report, the investigative report and the video confession by Charlie, he immediately issues on social media a public retraction of his claim. He said, hey, I was wrong. I jumped the gun. Akira did not commit the murder. I was wrong about that. Yes, I saw her with him the night before, but she clearly did not commit it. He apologized publicly for assuming she was the murderer, and he conceded Charlie's guilty. Charlie's the one who did this. And most people are still like, who's Charlie? David also contacted many news outlets and asked them for an interview so that he could set the record straight on the actual, on these major news stations. Because originally he gave an interview to the press, and so he wants to set the record straight with the press. And he asked, hey, can I have an interview with y'all so I can issue a formal retraction and apology? All the news outlets denied him the request, and shortly after that, the news outlets and George, remember George, doesn't like the Asians. George began a campaign to slander David as also complicit with the murder, along with Akira and Detective Williams. So now, according to the press, David's in on it. Detective Williams is in on it. Akira is still guilty. They're all in on it. They all murdered Dr. Brown. It's all a conspiracy. Social media slandered David and claimed he was attempting to gaslight people into believing that Akira was not the murderer. Oh, he wants to come with this confession and retraction. He's just trying to gaslight you. He's really part of it himself. 4 years after the murder of Dr. Brown, Charlie and George, so Charlie the murderer, George the false accuser, are celebrated as national icons. They're awarded numerous funds and donations. People fund them for all kinds of things to continue their campaign, presenting their claims. They're celebrated everywhere with honor. Social media continues to ignore the evidence and continues to actively slander Akira, Detective Williams, and David for all murdering Dr. Brown, and even for a slew of other murders. So it gets even more severe. Not only are they all in on this one murder, but you know what? Murders in 3 states away, they're guilty for that one too. A murder over there in that other country over there, they're guilty for that one too. Despite no evidence for the claims, they're guilty. They're in on this murder. They're in on all these murders. Social media analytics 4 years later revealed that Charlie's video confession of the murder that was posted on YouTube has only been viewed 20,000 times. So 20,000 views of the actual murder confession that's been up for 4 years. And David's video retracting his claim about Akira has only received 3,000 views in 4 years. However, a video slandering Akira as a prostitute by George with zero evidence has received over 1 billion views on YouTube to date. 1 billion views. Now think about that. The actual murder confession video, 20,000 views. Former retraction by one of the witnesses, 3,000 views. A video slandering Akira as a prostitute with no evidence, 1 billion views, with largely favorable comments. Is this evil? Are the actions of George, the press, and social media evil? The obvious answer is yes. If you have half a brain, you'll say yes. Okay, so shake your head and say, yes, this is evil. Now, this is a real story. It's a parable, but it's a parable about a real story. As you could probably guess by now, Akira is Pope Francis, who is accused of worshiping an idol of Pachamama on October 4th, 2019. George, the guy who doesn't like Asians, the false accuser, is a group of Catholic public figures in the majority of social media, in the majority of the press, who claim to have examined the evidence. They say they've looked into this, and yet they continue to slander Pope Francis for idolatry. George's bias against Asians is people's bias against Pope Francis and the bias that he's a heretic. Detective Williams, the one who uncovered the truth, is Father Deacon Anthony Dragani, an Eastern Catholic deacon here in the United States and religious studies professor. Detective Williams' report in Charlie's video confession showing who the real murderer is, that is Charlie. The evidence here is Father Deacon Dragani's video that he put out here on this channel, clearly demonstrating that Pope Francis did not worship an idol, and the image in the Vatican gardens on October 4th, 2019 wasn't even Pachamama, but it was the Virgin Mary. We went through a whole video analyzing it as if it was a crime scene and demonstrated that beyond a shadow of a doubt. And so the burden of proof is on those who would say that it's an idol and that there was idolatry. The burden of proof is not on somebody to maintain the contrary. The burden of proof is on the accusers. And the lie continues to this day. To this day. And I mean that literally. Right before I came on social media here to do this video, one of the comments in the comment section was repeating this lie. And we're going to see it here again in just a second with another video that was just put out. But I want to first say, don't be a George. Don't be a George. George is the guy who's just biased. Look at him. He's just all happy and smiling. Oh, George. Oh, he's just so happy with himself. Right? I bet he is. With all the honor and all the money that he gets for the false accusation, it puts a smile on that face. Don't be a George. Do not be a George. Let me show you something. I want to show you a David, not a George, a David. In fact, his name is Dave Gordon. And in a very real sense, I could also be a David. Because both he and I originally falsely accused Pope Francis of worshiping an idol, and yet when we were confronted with the evidence, we retracted that publicly. I want to show you a clip here. Let's watch Dave do this. So this is, y'all probably seen Timothy Gordon. This is his brother. Also has a channel, also has a show here on Church Militant. Drops a bomb on the show. Watch this. By the way, can y'all hear that? I want to make sure that y'all can hear it. Let me make sure the audio is enabled.
The so-called, heresy of Pope Francis, and this is the latest thing. The reason that some of them are doing it is because they really don't think he's the vicar of Christ, but they will not come out and say it. Now, some people have come out and say it.
Now, here's Christine Niles on Church Militant is saying, look, there's some people out there that are accusing Pope Francis of being a heretic. They're accusing him of all kinds of things. And one of the motivations is because some of them are people who don't even believe that Pope Francis is the Pope. And some of them have publicly said they don't believe Pope Francis is the Pope. Others are doing so privately, but are publicly hiding that fact from their viewers. Because after all, if they say that publicly, they'll lose a lot of viewers. So in other words, privately, they maintain this position, but they don't tell people about that publicly. And that's what she's talking about here. And she's right about that, by the way.
Said it, but I do, some of them I do know for a fact are privately sedevacantists, but they will not come out and say it. But
and I could corroborate what she's saying there. I also can, not naming names right now, but I know what she's talking about.
What they will do instead is they will push this program of doubt. Like here's another thing the Pope said. Is he really the Pope? And here's another thing. And they just keep doing this over and over and over again so that there's sufficient doubts in Catholics' minds created so that they start doubting his validity as well. But it's because
all right,
they themselves.
Watch. Dave is about to drop a bomb here.
I know for a fact some of these people, and some of them are very, very well-known people, pushing the doubt about Francis because they themselves are truly sedevacantists, but they don't have the courage or the honesty.
Sedevacantist is a person who believes that there is no Pope right now.
To come out and say, yep, this is where I stand, because they know they're going to lose their subscribers and followers.
And
because as soon as you say I'm a sedevacantist, you're going to alienate a lot of people.
Report falsely on something that later gets clarified, you have a duty to retract.
Yes.
You have a duty to go before people, and I'm guilty of this myself. I'll call myself out right now, because it turns out it seems like what was happening at the Amazonian Synod, where there was the so-called PACHAMAMA worship. It turns out, and Lofton did a great expose on this, interview on this. It seems like that was not PACHAMAMA worship after all.
Talking about the Vatican Gardens.
The Vatican Gardens specifically. Yeah. And, I wrote an article in the wake of that, like calling this out, saying that, there needs to be anger that cries to heaven for vengeance for idolatry in the Vatican. I got that wrong. I was wrong. I have egg on my face. Everybody who makes a mistake in writing or reporting on, especially the Pope, the Magisterium, it's like, if you're going to criticize the Magisterium and the Pope, and sometimes we have a calling to do that in order to, out of love for Christ and out of love for the bark of Peter. But if you're going to do it, you better make sure you're right. No one is going, when you're judged and you get up to St. Peter and Christ at the throne of Christ, you can always say, I listened to the shepherds you gave me. And if I was wrong and I erred, like I had a wrong take on the death penalty because Pope Francis's prudential judgment turned out to be wrong, you can, that is something where Christ is going to say, well, these are the shepherds I gave you. You were listening. You were trying to be faithful. You were in, invincible ignorance on this. But if you're going to the mat for saying something that, is irresponsible or wrong, or where you have vincible ignorance, then you're going to have to answer for that. And the people who have big platforms who are saying this, especially the cynical con men who are saying things they don't believe in order to fill their coffers with donations from the gullible public, they're going to have a lot to answer for.
So
Yeah, well said. And I think we all have egg on our face. I think the vast majority of us have egg on our face, including myself. I mean, we're all there, right? Yeah, we were wrong. We were wrong. If you haven't seen the video, I have it in the show notes. Go and watch it. Again, we treat it like a crime scene. We go through play by play and show the evidence. And believe me, I'm aware of the stuff to the contrary. I'm aware of the comments that Pope Francis has made and others at the press office. We tackle all of that. We address all that. We also offer criticisms of the Vatican Garden ceremony. There are some criticisms there, but it's not what many have claimed than it is, and it's still being repeated to this day. I appreciate Dave Gordon there, speaking the truth, saying, hey, look, I was wrong here. I was wrong there. Kudos to him. I've had to do that before. I'll probably have to do it again. I'm on YouTube every single day. I'm bound to get something wrong. I'm bound to get something wrong. I'm bound to find out that, I got this wrong, and that was a serious claim. I need to go and issue a retraction, a formal apology and retraction. I guarantee I'll have something like that. Guarantee it. And anybody else who's actively on social media, yeah, you'll have to do the same thing. If you're a person of integrity, you will do it. Now, let me show you something else here. So we got the Davids who said, sorry, I was wrong. Sorry. How many views has this received? 2.6 thousand in 1 week. 2.6 thousand in a whole week. And yet there's numerous videos out there still promoting the wild accusation and slanderous and murderous accusation, because it is spiritual murder, to attack a person's reputation falsely. Oh, those videos, people love it. They're eating it up. So you remember George. George was the one who just continued, no matter what, he just continued to falsely accuse. George, the false accuser, says, you know what? I've looked into the evidence. I've looked into things. But Akira's still guilty. And Akira's a prostitute. And Akira stole $16.2 quadrillion from Dr. Brown. And 4 years later, I've looked into this issue, and I can tell you Akira is as guilty as they come. And these other guys, Detective Williams, David, they're all part of it too. I want to ask you, is this a George? I'm not going to answer that question. I'll let you answer that question. Is this a George? So here we have a video by Taylor Marshall 20 hours ago, 56,000 views. 20 hours ago, Pope Francis accused of 10 heresies, says a priest who was rightly disciplined in 2021, if I recall correct. And what you're going to see here is Taylor Marshall repeating what the priest says and affirming it. Okay, so he's not just quoting the priest, he's also affirming and agreeing with it. Let's go to the 15-minute, 54-second mark. Tell me, is this a George?
Father Jesus Mary goes on, in fact, some religions practice evil, for example, idolatry or sacred prostitution.
But God cannot will evil. Since when has a pope made such a statement? Never. You have thus accepted a religious relativism that puts all religions on the same level and denies the specificity of Christianity as the supreme religion willed by God.
All things that Pope Francis has actually confirmed, as I've demonstrated on this channel. He confirms salvation is in Jesus alone, and he calls everyone to salvation in Jesus alone. I've demonstrated that on this channel multiple times. So this is a false accusation. But watch what comes up next. Take a wild guess what accusation comes up next.
There is no salvation apart from Jesus Christ. This is why you have taken part in the idolatry of 3 pagan ceremonies. The 4th of October with the 2019 with PACHAMAMA.
There you go. Accuses Pope Francis of worshiping an idol, namely an idol of Pachamama, which is a false accusation. It has been shown to be false, and yet it's still being repeated. And now what he's going to go to next is the accusation that he participated in a pagan ceremony in Canada, also a video that Father Deacon Dragani and I have done and treated as a crime scene. And Pope Francis was exonerated in that video when you find out all of the details. And I encourage everybody to go and watch it. Almost nobody has even cared to watch that video. But we will still be very quick to throw this in Pope Francis's face and accuse him of this. Is this a crime? Is this a spiritual crime? Is this spiritual murder? Well, you have to look at the evidence to know. Again, I'll put links to these things in the show notes. Go and look at the evidence. And then you tell me, is slander, is spiritual murder, is bearing false witness a spiritual crime? Well, I mean, let's just briefly look at the New Testament real quick to answer that question. I mean, there's a cornucopia of verses we could go to, but let's just go to a few. Matthew 12:36. But I tell you, Jesus says, that everyone will have to give an account on the day of judgment for every empty word or every idle word they have spoken. Everything you say, you will give an account for, especially what you say publicly. Moreover, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 10, thieves, the greedy, drunkards, the verbally abusive, or others say slanderers, revilers, and swindlers will not inherit the kingdom of God. Paul says, do not be deceived in verse 9. The slanderers and swindlers will not inherit the kingdom of God. In other words, they will not go to heaven if they persist in that sin. Now, if they repent of it, God's mercy is always available. But if they persist in the lies and slander, Paul says, don't be deceived. They will not inherit the kingdom of God. Moreover, the book of Revelation, the chapter before the final chapter of the Bible, Revelation 21, verse 8 says, but as for the cowardly, the faithless, the polluted, the murderers, that includes physical and spiritual, the fornicators, the sorcerers, the idolaters, and what? All liars. Their place will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. The same lake of fire that Satan, the false prophet, and the fallen angels are cast into for all eternity. Their place will be the lake of fire. Slanderers, liars, swindlers, murderers, spiritual or physical, do not be deceived. If you continue in this, according to scripture, according to divine revelation, you will spend eternity in the lake of fire. What is the solution? The solution is twofold. Number one, go to confession. Make yourself right with God, first and foremost. Go to a priest. Confess the sin of slander and bearing false witness. Even if you didn't know that it was false, even if you didn't know you were promoting a lie, you promoted a lie and you perpetuated it. You are bearing false witness, intentionally or not. Go to confession. That's number one. And number two, if you've publicly made those accusations, you need to do penance by publicly setting the record straight. You have that obligation. You have that duty. If you tarnish a person's name, you slander a person's character, you murder their character, and you find out you're wrong, you have a duty to make reparation by actually restoring their character, restoring their reputation on that point. Now, they may be wrong on something else, but on that point, you have a duty to restore their reputation and character. And if you don't, one can sincerely ask, are you really sorry for your sin? And if you're not really sorry for your sins are not absolved. So wrestle with that. Wrestle with that question. Public lies, public accusations do not need to be retracted privately. They need to be retracted publicly. Don't be a George. That's my word to you. Don't be a George. All right. Anyways, be a David. Don't be a George. I hope y'all enjoyed this one. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Check me out at patreon.com/Reason and Theology if you want to support what I'm doing here. I'll do it. God bless. Hey, everybody. Just wanted to tell you about my new free ebook, Church Chaos, Biblical Insights for Confused Catholics. If you are a confused Catholic and you're thinking about leaving the Catholic Church, or you're thinking about converting to the church, but you see that there's a crisis in the church and you're just unsure, this is the book for you. Again, it is free. Just simply go to reasonandtheology.com. You'll see a pop-up that comes up on your screen. Just simply click on it and you'll put in your email and it will provide you the free PDF ebook right then and there. Please check it out if you're confused about the situation in the Catholic Church today. reasonandtheology.com.
Is it possible that ancient aliens created other ancient aliens? Ancient alien theorists say yes. But then, is it also possible that ancient aliens created the ancient alien theorists? And are the ancient aliens and ancient alien theorists led by the Vatican, headed by the Pope? Ancient alien theorists and certain unnamed Catholic YouTubers say yes.
Tired of Catholic shows that peddle conspiracy theories that sound like something out of an Ancient Aliens episode? Check out Reason and Theology for a more reasonable take. Are you confused about how Catholic teaching authority works? With encyclicals, papal bulls, councils, and many other things, it's easy to get confused on what is authoritative and what is not. Fortunately, at maximusinstitute.com, I have prepared a course explaining the Magisterium from A to Z. Visit the website and check out the course Understanding the Magisterium for more information. Hey, pro-lifers, I want to remind you about realestateforlife.org. If you want to support the pro-life movement at no cost to you in the process of buying a home or selling a home, office, or any kind of property anywhere in the world, check out realestateforlife.org for more information. God bless.